Hey, once again, it's Santa Cruz County's #1 Google Slide stream coming at you live from Middlesex County, Massachusetts, where I am in a basement. Um, as usual this week, we have some great miracle content for you, talking about some kind of borderline cases, trying to address the question of how you can tell, because we're talking about bad miracles, shitty miracles here, how you can tell if something's a miracle or just normal stuff. How can you tell? Well, and to give you an example of how this can become an issue, you get 2 miracles for the price of 1 this week. I want to talk at the outset here about a lady named Magdalena de la Cruz, who lived not in antiquity, as you can probably tell by the name, but rather in the Renaissance. She was born in 1487. She did most of her holy stuff, or apparently holy stuff, in the 16th century. She appeared to live a saintly life. She got stigmata, the wounds on your hands and feet that show you're suffering like Christ suffered, which are supposed to be a pretty reliable, miraculous sign of holiness if you start having bleeding wounds on your hands and your feet. And she had them. And not only that, but she did a miraculous virgin birth, which is unusual for people who are not the Virgin Mary, and a variety of other kind of weirdo miracles. But the twist is that toward the end of her life, she tearfully confessed that in every case, her miracles had been set up by Satan. So she had one of the few attested cases in history of diabolic stigmata, false stigmata given to you by Satan. Even in those cases where you got what you think are clear signs, stigmata, bleeding wounds on your hands and feet, other kinds of magical stuff going on, you cannot be sure whether what you're looking at is a miracle or a trick played on you by the devil, because he does love tricks. He is tricksy. Well, and this is an important question, of course. We're lucky that we have books to tell us. In pretty much all of the cases that we'll be looking at, there's a book that just tells us, oh, hey, this is a miracle. So we don't have to make the decision ourselves. We can rely on the ancient evaluation and use that to kind of figure things out. But what if you're there in the moment? What if you're watching the stigmata form on Magdalena de la Cruz's hands? What do you do then? How do you decide if it's a miracle or if it's a trick played by the devil? And even worse, what if you're living it? What if you're living it? What if you are experiencing things you believe to be miraculous? How do you know whether that in fact is a sign of Jesus' blessing upon you, or if again it's the devil tricking you from the inside even? Well, and that brings me to the second miracle that I want to talk about today, and the thing that's going to take up the majority of my time. About a guy named Heron who fucks up pretty bad, as we'll see. Now, Heron is a pretty pious dude. He cohabits with the daddies of the desert daddies. I am changing the lexicon on this, by the way. I know I've been saying the desert fathers so far, and I know that all the books say desert fathers, but there's no good reason we can't say instead the desert daddies. And I think that desert daddies is something that's going to make people's eyes glaze over a little less. Good Lord, I did Google search this with safe search off. Just take a second to think and reflect before you do that in like a public space where people can see your screen. But that is going to be the official name change here. The Desert Daddies, these pioneers of holiness, people like St. Anthony, folks like a lot of the people we've been talking about up till now, and we'll continue to talk about. Heron lived with these folks, but he was not one of them, in the sense that he was not super righteous. I mean, he was pretty pious. He fasted a lot, but apparently he had some internal problems. And in particular, he had a wee little bit of pride, sin of superbia. And I'm using Latin here because this account does come from John Cassian, the guy whose Ricky card I showed you a couple of weeks ago. Heron's got a little bit of that pride. And pride, as those of you who have seen The Devil's Advocate will know, pride is another way that Satan can get at you. Satan can get in that way. And Satan does take advantage of Heron's pride and starts whispering in his ear. He's like, hey, jump in the well. Heron, hey, jump in the well. Come on, jump in the well, man. Come on, jump in the well. You'll be fine. It'll be a miracle. You'll fly out of the well like a magic miracle wizard because you're extremely holy. I wouldn't be talking to you otherwise. And I'm Jesus, a real person who whispers in your ear. Heron, not being able to conceive either of Satan taking on the form of Jesus or of the appropriate categories of mental illness to process this, actually goes for it. He hops in a well, and obviously it doesn't work. The other bros, the other desert daddies, do drag him out of the well. He's pretty fucked up when he comes out of it. All sorts of broken limbs, maybe paralyzed. John Cassian is a little vague on the details of his injuries, but suffice it to say, he did not miraculously levitate. Well, so this is a dumb story, right? But there is also a moral to it for John Cassian. The moral for him is the importance of discretion. Discretion, being discreet, which means something a little different, I think, nowadays, like the ability to keep a secret. But if you think about something like viewer discretion, a phrase like that, there it's about being able to use common sense to make a choice. And that's the etymological meaning. It comes from discerno, discernere, to be able to tell things apart, tell them apart. In this case, to tell apart the genuine miraculous powers of Jesus from the insinuations of the devil. Because Jesus will not butter you up. He will not appeal to your pride. He will not, as Heron's internal voice did, tell you that you're going to be reputed to be extremely holy if you do this miracle that he wants you to do. Jesus' moves are a little bit more subtle, like that one we were talking about with Abba Maches, where he gets the miraculous power to fall asleep. Or sometimes, if they are really the kind of the wild ones, like when St. Paul just murders people for not giving him all of their money, it's again very explicitly represented as being on behalf of Jesus rather than on behalf of the reputation of the person who's working the miracle. So there's some signals, red flags here that Heron is supposed to have noticed in John Cassian's telling that he does not pay attention to, because Heron lacks discretion, the ability to separate holiness from all that Satan nonsense. It's hard to do in the moment when you're living the miracle. Well, John Cassian's rule, and Heron is an example for this, Cassian's rule is, when in doubt, chuck it out. There are some other rules that go with this. It says, well, if you hear a voice exhorting you to do something miraculous, just say no. Unless you're pretty sure that it's Jesus, don't do it. He talks about some other instances where monks are inspired to try some really advanced level holiness stuff, like go out in the desert and not take any food with them and just rely on miraculous feeding by Jesus. And they encounter, after several days of just wandering around in the desert and starving, they encounter some Barbars, a group of nomads called the Maziki, who are said in a lot of accounts to plague the desert daddies by attacking them and stealing their non-existent resources. So these Maziki encounter them and offer them some food. And one of the brothers is like, "Oh, that's nice. That's cool. It's a miracle that somebody showed up in the middle of the desert to give us food." And the other brother says, "You know what? That's not good enough as a miracle. That's too much of a shitty miracle. I'm going to hold out for the real miraculous feeding. I want to get manna and quail or something like that." Well, and wouldn't you know it, the New Testament does say not to tempt your Lord God, and that means don't try and get him to do extra special miracles for you. So the brother who took the food from the Maziki lives, and the other brother who didn't just dies out in the desert, like you do when you go out in the desert and don't take food. The point of that story, much like the point of Heron's story, is that you shouldn't push too far on looking for a miracle. You shouldn't be ambitious in seeking miracles. And if you get a whisper that you should try and do miraculous works, again, when in doubt, check it out. The other thing is, for God's sake, don't keep it a secret. If you get one of these impulses in your brain's heart, because Satan hates publicity. So what you want to do is tell the seniores, the older monks in the monastery or round about the impulse, and let them decide, let them judge. And they're probably going to check it out because they'll be in doubt. Well, these doctrinal things that miracles argue do usually have kind of implications beyond just the doctrinal issue at stake. And for the early church, this is definitely also about the danger of unrestricted miracle power. You want to discourage people from believing that they have the power to do and work miracles. Because there's a kind of a record of miracle workers starting their own sects, their own hiereses, their own heresies, fissioning Christianity. If you can work miracles, how different are you really from Jesus? You've got that kind of a magic power. Why not start your own religion? Why not do your own prophecy? Why not just set up your own kind of your own company instead of franchising this Christianity thing? This is a danger that kind of looms at moments of religious revolution too. It's a big deal during the European Renaissance, after the Reformation. In the wars of religion, people are always working miracles and starting their own kind of weird apocalyptic sects. So the solution for Protestant churches then, but also for the nascent Catholic Church in the 4th, 5th century CE, is to replace the anarchy of individually governed religious worship or small churches that aren't really connected together with a kind of a hierarchy where individuals are not competent to decide whether something is a miracle, but only the seniores are, only the people at the top of the monastery. Because the monastery is one of the means by which spiritual anarchy gets turned into spiritual hierarchy in the early Christian church. It is a means of bringing the power of the miracle under control. Because within the Christian community, as we've said, miracles are sort of powerful arguments that you can make for one side or another. Among the desert daddies who are kind of loose and free, you see this happen quite a lot, like with the miracle that we talked about last week, the self-cannibalizing baby. But once you start forming monasteries, this kind of spiritual charisma gets more routine, and you have fewer cases of people doing powerful miracles to win arguments. Miracles are a dangerous power that runs against institutions. Institutions are always kind of trying to bring it under control. Well, and the non-miracle of Heron is definitely in the service of that project, let's say, for John Cassian. Now, I've said that you can do a lot of miracles we're talking about at home. Obviously, don't try this one. If you are hearing voices like that, talk to someone about it. Talk to your local Seigneur to find out for sure that those voices are from the devil. They're probably not from Jesus. And just in general, I guess if you do some of these terrible miracle tricks at home, don't trick yourself into thinking you're doing actual miracles. Acknowledge that none of us now really are competent to decide whether something is a miracle. We have to rely on these earlier authorities, the books that we're reading and talking about in this series of lectures. Well, that is about it for this week. Great to talk to you from the sunny state of Massachusetts, and I will catch you on the flip side.